Another season of Big East women's basketball is nearly underway, and there are plenty of storylines to follow. Which teams are poised for a breakout season? Who's new to the conference, and how will they fare this season? And how will UConn guard Paige Bueckers perform in her return to the court from injury? And more. The college basketball season starts Monday, and T. Baker is here to talk all things Big East to get you ready for it.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Hello and happy Friday. You are locked on to women's basketball. I'm host Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. If this is your first time listening to Locked On Women's Basketball, welcome. We at The Next have over 100 reported pieces every single month. We have a beat reporter on every single WNBA team, more than 15 different NCAA beats, including the two of us. So get that YouTube subscription up, and you can also support us by subscribing to The Next, $9 a month, $72 a year at thenexthoops.com. Today, we'll be chatting all about what teams to keep an eye out for, new and returning players to watch out for, and what Big East non-conference games to put on your calendar. Joining me today is The Next Big East writer, T. Baker. So T, first of all, thank you for joining me. Second, I assume I know the answer to this, but who was picked to win the Big East, and who are some other top contenders?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Natalie. Always good to talk Big East hoops with you. So in a surprise to no one, the UConn Huskies are the predicted preseason favorite for this season. They also have the preseason player of the year in senior guard Paige Bueckers and preseason freshman of the year, KK Arnold. So they are the top team, as they have been in the Big East since they rejoined it in 2021, winning both the regular season and the Big East tournament in their time each season in the Big East. So I think, beyond UConn, Creighton also received a first place vote. They've got, their senior foursome of Lauren Jensen, Morgan Malley, Morgan Mogensen, and Emma Ronsick. And they are a squad that's been together for the past 3 years or so. They have a lot of chemistry and have accomplished a lot already together, and looking forward to seeing that squad kind of in their senior season. And then for Marquette, they were the third pick out of the coaches in the Big East Conference this year. And they are really a team that's had a lot of success in recent years. Coach Megan Duffy has really built a culture in Marquette. And, they're led by senior guard Jordan King and their 6'2" forward, Liza Carlin. They lost Chloe Murata, who was part of kind of their trio last season. But those two, in addition to some new transfers, will bring some new energy into Marquette. And Villanova, they lost Maddie Siegrist. That cannot be ignored. A major loss. She was the leading scorer in Villanova women's basketball history. So they're making up for that this season with their two more experienced players in Christina Dulce and Lucy Olson, who was their second leading scorer last year. So those are kind of my front runners. And in my Big East preview that dropped today, I kind of break down each team by the tiers. And so those four, right in that order, UConn, Creighton, Marquette, and Villanova represent kind of the top tier of the Big East this season.
And then are there any dark horse teams you think might surprise some people?
So it's tough to say. I think in the world of the transfer portal, the preseason poll is a rough indicator, especially of what's to come. I would say that I was surprised to see St. John's ranked number 6 in the preseason poll because they had such a breakout season last year. But their team largely turned over. So they've lost, a lot of their talent from last year, a lot of their scoring production, but also have brought in new transfers and freshmen. And I think the thing to consider, in terms of them being the 6th seed is perhaps folks are underestimating Coach Joe Tartamella's ability to meld together a really good team with transfers and new players like he did last season. So I expect them to finish higher than 6th this season. But again, there's a lot of new players on each team. It's kind of hard to say at this point what they're going to look like once they get on the court.
Yeah, I totally understand about the preseason poll. I've talked to coaches that have said, they do it based on what people are returning, but we need a metric at the beginning of the season. But I definitely understand where you're coming from, that it can be hard to tell with so many players transferring. And I do want to touch on Georgetown's head coach, Tasha Butts, passed away prior to the start of the season. Has Georgetown talked at all about how they'll be honoring her this season?
They haven't specifically talked about how they're honoring the coach. I think Tasha Butts is just worth mentioning. Legendary Tennessee Lady Vol, played 4 years there under the direction of Pat Summitt, and really has impacted the games in so many ways, both in her playing career and her coaching career. So there's not been a specific indication yet that Georgetown is going to be honoring her this season in a particular way, but I know they will. I know they've been keeping her memory alive. I know at Big East Media Day, everyone had their Tasha Tough pins on, and we're really just rallying behind someone who is gone too soon and, didn't ever get the chance to be a head coach, but really in her few months at Georgetown already instilled a bit of a culture there and made a huge impact on the roster. So, her legacy lives on through players old and new, and it's a tough way to begin the season, and we're all keeping her memory alive this season.
And what are you expecting from the new head coaches this season, including Georgetown's interim head coach, who has a difficult path ahead coaching this season?
Yeah, great question. And there's a lot of new coaching energy this season in the Big East. So, first, Erin Bath at Providence. I am local to Providence, so I've had the chance to kind of get to know her, see her in different settings at her introductory press conference. And she's really just bringing a great energy to the team. She has a lot of assistant coach experience, and, the players who I spoke with on Media Day just really reference how it feels like an entirely new culture at Providence. And, Erin Bath said that people should be surprised, by how Providence is going to come out this season. She's expecting them to fare better than the 9 seed that they got in the preseason poll. So I'm just excited to see what she brings to that team. That's kind of needed a boost for a few years now. I think she brings that. In Xavier, that is our sort of bottom of the pack team in the Big East in recent seasons. They went winless last season, 0-20 in conference play, which obviously is a huge bummer for them. And I think it prompted the change from Coach Melanie Moore. And so Billy Chambers, who's an experienced head coach, 2-time Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, or the MAC Coach of the Year. She's won the regular season and MAC tournament champions 2 times apiece, and she's got a decade of head coaching experience at Iona that she now brings to Xavier. And I think it's important to give that team the space to kind of develop in her image. Maybe this season's not going to be a quick 100% turnaround, but I think she's getting the players she wants in place. She's setting up a system, and ultimately I think will make that team a bit more competitive. And then finally, like you mentioned, in place of Tasha Butts, who passed away, Darnell Haney is going to be stepping in. He's a coach that comes with head coaching experience. He was a head coach that was actually going to be an associate head coach under Tasha Butts, but has some head coaching experience at Jacksonville and is poised to take over. When I spoke to him at Media Day, a lot of the conversation was about Tasha and his memories of her. But I think he is the right person because he was hired by Tasha and has some experience with what she was trying to build to really take this team through a difficult time and hopefully turn some things around in Georgetown.
Awesome. Thank you, for talking about that. And again, for talking about Tasha Butts. Coming up next, we'll discuss specific players that T thinks we should keep an eye on and more. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schulz? You can now find Community Plays under the Promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. PrizePicks is simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. There are quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types that make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. With the NBA season here and the NFL season in full swing, I'm now really excited to pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James and Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Everydayers, thank you for tuning in once again, and make sure you come back tomorrow for another episode from our WNBA draft experts. So, T, what are some of the players that you're most excited to watch this season?
So, I think starting off with, UConn's senior guard, Paige Bueckers, she was the 2021, her freshman season, Naismith Player of the Year, National Player of the Year. And I think, the country's interested to see her come back. She's a player that, has influence both in the game and off the court in terms of her, name, image, and likeness presence. And I think what's scary about her is that Gino Auriemma, head coach of the Huskies, has said that he expects that she's a better player now than she was before. So I think, it'll be interesting to see how she performs when the lights are on. But I think, Paige is the type of player that lives for these moments and lives for kind of the ability to, have clutch minutes on the court. She loves the game. So I'm excited to see her play. I think, another player that I'm also interested in seeing this season is Bernaya Mayo. She is a player who has transferred from the Atlantic 10, which I know you cover, from UMass, Natalie. So your loss is my gain in the conference, but I'm really excited to see her come on in. She's a transfer with St. John's, and she's a really dynamic two-way player. I know you've seen her play before, last season's Atlantic 10 All-Tournament MVP. And she has just a presence to kind of be a program changer, add some depth for St. John's. And as I mentioned, Joe Tartamella, head coach of St. John's, is skilled at blending new talent. So I'm really excited to see her this season, step on into Queens and be in the Big East.
Yeah, watching her in that Atlantic 10 tournament in 2022 when she won that MVP was just amazing. She was very dominant playing near her hometown. It was awesome to see. The Big East, like many other schools, saw a lot of movement in the transfer portal. Are there any other transfers that you think are significant, and how will they impact their new teams?
Yeah, so one that, Marquette's coach, Megan Duffy, mentioned is Franny Hottinger. She was the Patriot League Player of the Year last season, so another mid-major talent coming on over to the Big East. She averaged a double-double last season, over 20 points and 10 rebounds, and, I think she's a player who has a lot of potential. I love to see mid-major players kind of develop their games in the Big East. I think a good example of that is Lou Lopez Seneschal, who came to UConn last season, and in her one season as a transfer from a mid-major had an incredible impact. She grew her game, and now she's a WNBA player. So I think there's opportunity in the visibility that the conference has, and there's some great coaching that she'll learn from over at Marquette. Another player I'm excited to see is Ari Wiggins. She is a guard who is leaving Michigan. She was the 2021 India Miss Basketball runner-up. So she's a player who is hometown is in Indiana. It's in Indianapolis. And so her coming to Butler, which is in Indiana, is kind of a homecoming for her. She's spoken about kind of how she's able to bring the leadership she's gained, the leadership skills she's had from her 2 years at Michigan to a young Butler team. And she's part of a squad of 7 players, actually, who are from Indiana on head coach Austin Parkinson's team. So he's really building a Indiana-based roster, attracting that local talent. And there's a lot of local talent in Indiana. So to both get freshmen from the state and transfers who are coming home to Indiana, I think is a huge positive step for that program. And looking forward to seeing how she adds some leadership and some guard depth for their team.
And I read your Big East preview and noticed that there were 4 Creighton players that got to compete in 3x3 over the summer. How do you think that'll help them this season?
So I think in general, the 3-on-3 game just prepares players by, developing some fast ball movement. I think the Creighton players have had no problems with that. Again, this is Jensen, Malley, Mogensen, and Ronsek. They are the 4 senior players on Creighton's squad. And I think so, on 3-on-3, there's a shorter time clock. It's a half court game and the transitions are really quick from offense to defense. So I think this is a team that's had a lot of chemistry already. Ball movement and offensive prowess hasn't ever really been a challenge. It's a quick motion offense and with an emphasis on, beyond the arc shooting. And they've really mastered that together in their time together. But I think that the defensive intensity that 3x3 requires, I think will translate this season for them, and they'll kind of be able to add some of that defensive skill to their offensive game. And I think if there's anything that Creighton could grow in, it's the defensive area. They've always been a super efficient offensive team, but backing that up on the defensive end and creating more offensive opportunities through their defense is going to be kind of how they elevate further. And I think these players gained some defensive skills over the summer, and they won the whole thing. Not only did they compete, they were the gold medalists. So exciting times in Omaha.
That's not something you hear every day. Exciting times in Omaha. But I think there might be with all of that returning talent. I really liked this quote from Gino Auriemma that made its way into your preview. Isn't there a limit on how many years you can spend in college? Gino said that or joked about that during Big East Media Day, adding, I think it's 4 of Creighton's 5 starters. They've been in Omaha longer than the College World Series. Every time I look up, those guys are in the starting lineup. So I really enjoyed that quote. But in the era of the transfer portal, it is interesting to see those players stick it out and continue to build their camaraderie over the summer.
Yeah. And, I think it's telling that a team has stuck together that long. It's a testament to the coaching staff in Creighton. I think it's a testament to the system they've developed. Players who go to Creighton want to be part of that system, want to be part of that team basketball. So I really think it's an exception, in today's sort of era of the transfer portal to have players stick around in the classes that they've entered. So exciting stuff. And I think that experience will go far for Creighton this season.
So Lauren Park Lane has moved on from Seton Hall. I know it's going to be tough to imagine Seton Hall without her. Seton Hall welcomes 9 newcomers, 6 transfers, and 3 true freshmen. How do you think that's going to impact them this season?
Yeah, so Lauren Park Lane is actually headed to Mississippi State, so she's not returning this season. But she has, taken that program to another level, I think, with her guard play. She, in the past few seasons, was their leader. And so I think this new influx of talent of 9 new players, both in the transfer portal and freshmen, are trying to build a bit of a new culture at Seton Hall. And I think that it's important to also note that the talent that's there is going to set a strong foundation for that team. I think Azena Baines, who is their grad student leader, is kind of who Tony Bozzella, head coach of the Pirates, is saying is going to be kind of the leader, the face of the franchise, if you will. So I think she's poised to step into that role. And she reported that, the newcomers on the team are really growing together and learning together. And hopefully, it's like we said earlier, it's a bit of a toss up the preseason. We were talking about that kind of offline about how preseason polls don't often mean that much, especially in the era of transfer portal, because it's hard to know once the lights come on, once the team's out, kind of how they'll perform. But, positive sign that a lot of players have transferred into Seton Hall and that they're seeming to gel so far.
Coming up next, we'll talk about non-conference games to watch, and more. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. With tons of action coming up on Sunday, I know I'm looking at some of the weekly specials, including Jamar Chase and Stephon Diggs combining for 200-plus receiving yards. There's also either Jalen Hurts or Dak Prescott throwing for 4-plus pass touchdowns. You can also build parlays, bet on the spreads and total points on Thursday, Sunday, and Monday Night Football, bet on season awards, and so much more. You can also bet on who will have the most regular season total passing touchdowns this season, which team will finish with the best regular season record, and will Tyreek Hill break the record for most receiving yards in a single season. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. So I have my calendar out. What are some Big East non-conference games to watch?
So the pieces, the conference games I'm looking forward to this upcoming week, kind of the first week of the season, speak to Creighton head coach Jim Flannery's ability to schedule non-conference opponents that are tough. He always wants to prepare his team for the NCAA tournament. So he's got two Summit League contenders headed into Omaha, North Dakota State and South Dakota. Those are teams that have in the past really been towards the top of the Summit League, are rivals, and have made some national noise. So looking forward to those matchups. And then November 16th, I think this is a matchup that's nationally sort of going to be really interesting. UConn, who's a number 2 preseason poll position in the AP poll, is taking on number 14 Maryland. So it's a ranked, non-conference matchup early in the season, and looking forward to catching that one in person.
Yeah, and any longtime UConn fans, former women's basketball player Tamika Williams, now Tamika Williams-Jeter is coming back to UConn next Wednesday, November 8th. Her first time as a head coach coaching against UConn. So as an A10 writer, I am personally very excited to see that. T, do you have any final Big East thoughts?
Yeah, just one more point there. Another one that I have circled is Paige Bueckers' return to Minnesota to take on the Gophers. I think, the coaching staff at UConn always does a great job of connecting a player with one homecoming. So this summer, they headed to Croatia on a trip for Nika Mule, and looking forward to Paige's homecoming. I think she's going to get a lot of love when she heads to Minnesota. So final thoughts, just tune in this season. I know I'm sort of, for the past several seasons, talked about the increasing competitiveness of the Big East, but I think this season, with new coaching talent in, lots of players from the transfer portal, mid-majors and otherwise, there's just a lot of talent that's attracted to the Big East. And we've talked about it before, kind of UConn rejoining the conference has helped the conference grow overall. It increases the level of competition. People want to play against teams like UConn that get national attention, that sell out their, arenas and kind of draw crowds. So, really looking forward to kind of how the conference has continued to grow in my years covering it. And I think this year should be no different.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me today, T. Where can the people find you and your work?
So the people can find me at TeeBaker, TeeBaker _ WBB for women's basketball on social media platforms and over at The Next. My Big East preview came out today, so go check that out to read a little bit more about kind of what we spoke about today.
Awesome. Thanks so much again. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Everydayers, as you know, I'm here for you every other Friday and every Saturday. Make sure to tune in to Hunter, and Lincoln. Tomorrow they'll be talking about their 2024 preseason big board, and make sure to check that out.